that I had two choices in front of me, a life in which all people like me and a life in which there are people who dislike me. And I was told to choose one. I would choose the latter without a second thought. Before being concerned with what others think of me, I want to follow through with my own being. That is to say, I want to live in freedom. So says the philosopher. To the youth who responds, "Are you free now?" "Yes, I am free." "You do not want to be disliked, but you don't mind if you are." "Yes, that's right." Not wanting to be disliked is probably my task, but whether or not so-and-so dislikes me is the other person's task. Even if there is a person who doesn't think well of me, I cannot intervene in that. One would make the effort to lead a horse to water, but whether he drinks or not is that person's task. That's some conclusion. The courage to be happy also includes the courage to be disliked. When you have gained that courage, your interpersonal relationships will all at once change into things of likeness. I've just read you a little extract from a book called The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro, Kishimi, and FUmitake Koga. Apologies for pronunciation. I first came across this book when I listened to it as an audiobook, and actually, because it's a conversation between the philosopher and the youth, I really love it as an audiobook. Heads up. Anyway, why give you this extract? Because this episode is actually about daring to be disliked. I'm Trisha Lewis, the host of Self-Belief Unsquashed, and it may be a short little episode like this one or a longer interview, but really it's all about exploring stuff which is so human and getting to the bottom of why we sometimes self-squash, making sure we stay unsquashed, basically. This isn't about you being deliberately mean and horrid and disliked. You're unlikely to be any of those things, but you just won't be everybody's cup of tea, will you? You know, your humor, your lifestyle choices, your beliefs, even appearance. Who knows what might trigger negative reactions in someone just because ... It is unlikely that you're being disliked all over the place, and much more likely that you fear being disliked, or you're making a false assumption that you are disliked. So what's all that about? Let's explore. With the help of some, in hindsight, amusing anecdotes, we'll look at the symptoms and the drivers of this, let's call it what it is, rejection fear. And why does that matter? And what might we do to reframe and find a way through this, to reduce what, after all, is one of the biggest self-squashers? For those of you new to this term, self-squashing, it's at the core of the book I wrote called The Mystery of the Squashed Self, my TEDx called Beware the Self-Squashing Prophecy. And it's a sort of alternative way of looking at imposter syndrome, I suppose. It's got a different variant to it. So do check out those two things I just mentioned. But let me give you my definition of my made-up term, self-squashing. Suppressing your true self due to a fear that revealing your full passion, personality, and power will have you judged as an unlikable show-off or an unprofessional outsider. Interesting, eh? Let's get on with this. Let's explore. Firstly, what are the symptoms that you might be having this rejection fear ruling your life in ways that is not helpful and squashing you? Don't go changing, trying to please me. I'll take you just the way you are. Sorry, Barry, the Walrus of Love, Barry White. That beautiful song I've just ruined, but you know, he had a point. I mean, thanks, Barry, for not wanting me to change because you like me just the way I am, but it's a bit difficult sometimes to really believe that. We do try to please, don't we? And we do sometimes change who we are in order to please. And that's fine, of course, up to a certain extent. You know, you've got to be polite, you've got to be respectful, you've got to adapt to situations, you've got to dress more smartly than you might otherwise when it is the right thing to do, or more casually, etc., etc. That's normal and necessary. It's what's called impression management. And as humans, we're bound to do that. But if your default behavior is to change in order to please, that doesn't sound quite so good, does it? I said I'd give you a few amusing anecdotes. I'll keep them short. But during my early sort of dating days, shall we say, I was obsessed with being the person that I thought that person wanted me to be. I even went to the extent of buying a book which was popular at the time called Linda Goodman's Star Signs, Love Signs or something. And it was full of actual summaries of what every star sign was like, the male, the female, and how each of those might be right for each other or not right for each other in a number of different categories. There were charts. And I would actually try and find out very quickly the star sign of someone I fancied, and then become the ideal person according to all those things that apparently they like. Oh, wow. I also remember, and I'm sure this will be familiar, saying, oh, yeah, I love that band when I'd never heard of them. I even went to the extent of buying an LP once, and I remember what it was. It was Ricky Lee Jones, because this guy had said how much he liked Ricky Lee Jones and this particular song. And then he was coming around to my place. So I thought, because I said, oh, so do I, I've got the LP, which was a lie. I needed to have it on display. That's ridiculous. I remember buying whole new outfits of clothing because I thought this is the kind of look this person is going to like. And so it goes on. Funny in hindsight. So I guess that's what I'm talking about. One of the symptoms is that you are changing yourself to be what you think other people want you to be, more than a straightforward impression management polite thing. What else? Having a general survive rather than thrive feeling at the end of every day, which is a bit of a red flag. It suggests that you are exhausting yourself by keeping up an act in order to get through another day and not do anything that might have you rejected, disliked, misunderstood. You might have lots of friends, but no, let it all hang out, mates. You might have a problem with setting boundaries, continuously saying yes when inside your head you were saying, no, actually, that's not my thing. No, I haven't got time for that. That doesn't appeal to me. But you've said yes. I'm not delving into these in any detail, but I think there might be some bells ringing because guess what? You're human. So what are the drivers behind all this? Well, firstly, I'll give you a big umbrella term that I use, which is the fibs that hold us back. And that stands for fears, illusions, and baggage. And if you actually think of all the things that come under those three headings, again, there's going to be lots that apply to this particular thing, this fear of rejection. What are the drivers really? Well, you being human. I mean, we are actually wired to do things that don't have us thrown out of the tribe into the wilderness where we're going to starve. So it's very natural that we want to be liked. We want to not stand out too much. We want to fit in, want to be accepted. Under the illusions category, you might also put social media stuff, you know, the trolling fear that makes you a little bit bland, a bit magnolia, a bit too agreeable, or the constant sense that everybody's reality is a certain kind of thing that they're doing when they're on show, when of course it isn't. And so that messes with your head. The illusion that people are thinking about every little thing that comes out of your mouth, every little action you do, every little step you take, every pimple and bit of our clothing. No, they're not. There's a thing called the spotlight effect, which I'll go into on another episode, but it is that sense that we think people are taking more notice of every detail about us than actually they are. And then there's this great thing, this bit of research, and I refer to this in my TEDx talk, actually. It's by Erica Boothby. It was done in 2018, so quite recent. And it's a thing she came up with called the liking gap, which is our tendency to underestimate how much other people like us when we first meet them. Basically, we're not very good at picking up the signals. And I think our tendency to veer towards negative thoughts, which again is totally human, kicks in as well. Yeah, we're too wrapped up in ourselves, aren't we? We're self-conscious, which suffocates our being present, which kind of brings me on to ways to reframe and explore and move beyond this fear. I guess being present is huge, and getting out of your head, less self-conscious. So let's try curiosity, more listening, more picking up on clues, which means that you really do have to get out of your cycle of, are they thinking about this? Are they thinking about this about me? You know, I've just walked out of the room. Are they talking about me? Da, 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 da. No. Oh, I'm interested in what they just said. I want to find out about. Oh, that was an interesting meeting. Next time I see them, I'll ask it, da, 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 da. We really do need to reduce this fear. We're not going to eradicate it because I've just said it's human. We kind of need it to a certain extent, but we want it not to be the joy-sapping, self-squashing thing that it can be. So ways forward, as I said, include curiosity, being present, and that also plays into your front of stage and backstage behavior. Now, this is borrowed from a book by Erving Goffman, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. And if you've ever had a conversation with me in the past, I probably would have referred to this. I studied him at university and I have a background as an actor. So his dramaturgy theory about we all sort of have a front of stage, a backstage, all those kind of personas we bring to situations really appealed to me. And it's true, isn't it, that we have to have a certain act that we put on up to an extent. But what we're looking to do is reduce the identity gap. So your on stage and off stage you is not completely miles apart with a chasm in between. And again, I kind of borrowed that term identity gap from another book I have on my top books shelf by Joe Dispenza, which is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I'll reference all this, obviously. Above all, you need to recognize when you are acting and the differences between your onstage and backstage you. That's just self-awareness, isn't it? So don't beat yourself up about it. Just recognize it and press pause and say, whoa, 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 what was I doing there? And talking of which, unpack your baggage. Put it out on the forensics table. You can't ignore it. You're going to have it. You can't even totally bin it. It's part of who you are, but you can kind of name it a bit more and reframe it. Name it, reframe it. I quite like that. I'll shut up on that note because that was genius. So I started with a quote from the book, The Courage to Be Disliked. I will now finish with a very simple quote from that same book. The philosopher says, for a human being, the greatest unhappiness is not being able to like oneself. Thanks for listening. Hope it sparked some ideas. Go and explore and experiment. And if you want to listen to the TEDx talk, Beware the Self-Squashing Prophecy, or perhaps consider buying the book, there's a Kindle or a print version, or just find a little bit more out about this thing about self-squashing, head over to trishalewis.com. All the links are there. And I look forward to the next episode of Explore.